Jacob's Well tragedy. On November 23, 1983, two students from Texas State University, Richard and Clark, decided to explore one of the most dangerous underwater caves in the area. They knew that once someone ventured inside, returning to the surface was nearly impossible unless they avoided the fourth chamber. Jacob's Well had 4 chambers, reaching the first, and second was relatively easy. But entering the third was extremely challenging. The entrance to the third chamber was only a few centimeters wide, leading to a 10-foot wide room. Beyond this, the passage to the fourth chamber was long and narrow, only 60 centimeters wide, with loose gravel frequently falling and blocking the path. 2 experienced cave divers had lost their lives 2 years earlier in this very spot, suffocating when the gravel sealed the way. For amateur water divers, attempting this was sheer foolishness. Unfortunately, Richard and Clark, despite being skilled water divers, lacked any real cave diving experience. Perhaps it was a streak of bad luck for them, but they were determined to venture inside to earn their diving expert certificates, an achievement they highly desired. His instructor Don knew about that scary cave story and had already warned him about that tragic incident. Once he entered the cave with one of his companions and reached the fourth chamber via the third chamber. There, a large pile of gravel collapsed, blocking the way back. The narrow 60-centimeter passage made it impossible for Don to move his arms freely to clear the gravel, and his efforts only caused more gravel to fall. His oxygen tank also failed, and some water entered his lungs. Struggling to survive, Don managed to clear enough gravel to squeeze through and asked his companion to share his tank regulator for a few breaths before attempting to reach the surface. Due to prolonged oxygen deprivation, carbon dioxide had spread throughout Don's body, and his abdomen had swollen to 4 times its normal size. The pressure had ruptured his pancreas, and he was moments from death. Despite these challenges, he made it to the surface in his final 20 seconds. Even after knowing this story, the students refused to back down. On November 23, 1983, they dove into Jacob's Well. They passed through the first and second chambers with ease and reached the third chamber. Upon seeing the narrow passage to the fourth chamber, they removed their oxygen tanks and held them in their hands to proceed. After squeezing through the 2-foot-wide tunnel into the fourth chamber, Clark noticed that Richard had dropped his tank. He quickly handed his regulator to Richard, and the two began sharing breaths, passing the regulator back and forth. They immediately tried to return, reaching the third chamber. However, as they moved their tanks forward, a terrifying noise startled them. It was the sound of one of their tanks hitting the cave wall. The students had accidentally taken the wrong path and were now lost in the maze-like cave system. Their oxygen tanks were completely empty. Clark, with a single breath, swam 75 feet to the surface and managed to escape. Tragically, Richard remained trapped. His body had stopped functioning from lack of oxygen and sheer panic. Water filled his lungs, and he succumbed to the ordeal. Clark immediately contacted a rescue team, and Don arrived on the scene. Recognizing his students, Don was shocked and saddened, especially since he had warned them multiple times about the dangers of cave diving. He had even sealed the passage to the fourth chamber with cement to prevent anyone from going too deep. But divers had broken through and put up a sign reading, "No one can stop us from going inside." Don had also placed a most dangerous warning sign outside the cave, but it had been ignored. By the time the rescue team retrieved Richard's body, it was too late. Losing his friend in such a tragic manner devastated Clark. Following the incident, the government banned access to Jacob's Well permanently. June 24, 1967. In England's Lake District, Mossdale Cavern was waiting for 10 adventurers. But little did they know stepping into this cave would be the last decision of their lives. 10 cavers planned to explore the narrow walls of the cavern. Among them, 2 had been here before, so the rest of the group felt confident about the journey. Their goal was to reach a part of the cave no one had ever explored before. They believed it would be the greatest achievement of their lives. The 10 cavers entered the cavern, and they quickly realized how challenging it was. The walls were so tight that standing upright was almost impossible. 4 cavers gave up and decided to return to the surface. When they came outside, they noticed clouds in the sky, but didn't think the situation was serious enough to worry about their friends still inside. Meanwhile, the remaining 6 cavers continued moving deeper into the cave. A light drizzle started outside. The 4 cavers who had exited built a small shelter and stayed there, but the rain quickly turned into a heavy downpour, and water started collecting outside the cave. The situation became alarming. Inside the cavern, the 6 cavers reached the far marathon passage, a tunnel only 18 inches by 12 inches wide. They noticed some water seeping in but didn't think much of it. They had no idea how much water was about to flood the cave. As the water level rose, the cavers decided to retreat, but death was already waiting for them. They were 3 hours away from the surface, an impossible distance in these conditions. The slippery walls and rising water made it nearly impossible to move. Fear gripped them. Their heartbeats raced, and their bodies started to give out. Outside, the 4 waiting cavers rushed for help. Rescue teams arrived and tried pumping water out of the cave. Thousands of volunteers worked to send oxygen into the cavern. But sadly, the 6 cavers couldn't find any safe spot inside. They perished, trapped in the flooded passages, and their bodies remained buried in Mossdale Cavern forever. On June 24, 1967, 6 brave cavers lost their lives inside the unforgiving depths of Mossdale Cavern.